Hi, my name is Francis Dsouza, and I'm co-founder and CEO of FinGig.Pro, a fractional leadership services company. You can follow us on LinkedIn or on our YouTube channel. I'm particularly delighted today to be part of our inaugural video interview with a select group of industry veterans, our experts as we call them. And our guest today is an old friend and respected colleague, Livia Lobo, whom I've known for, almost 40 years to the day. She first interviewed me and was part of the selection team when I joined the Standard Chartered Bank as a management trainee. So delighted to have you with us, Livia. And for those who don't know enough about Livia, she's truly a global HR leadership expert. As I said, she started her career even before she joined Standard Chartered, but it's been across various industries: banking, education, consulting, shipping, and I think more recently, the very intriguing OPCW, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, which I'm hoping we get to talk about as well on this interview. So welcome, Livia. You've always been somebody I've admired personally and professionally. I think I should tell you why as well. So not just for your craft, you're exceptionally good at what you do in HR management, but because as a human being, you genuinely care and you have the courage of conviction. And I've seen you stand up for what you believe in. I've seen less and less of that as I advanced in my career. So when I look back, those things stand out particularly for me. So very happy to have you, and I hope you're as happy to be with us. But thank you for being our first guest.
Thank you, Francis. That's really a very glowing tribute about me. I've just muddled through my 40-year career and sort of been very blessed by fantastic colleagues. I'm not saying this because, of course, you've said good things about me, but genuinely, I mean, we're here today 40 years on since we last met because of something that is very sort of, I would say, truly connecting between you and me in terms of the way we sort of handle people and our careers. So that's where the bond is, that's where the connection is, and that's why we're still friends, even though we haven't been colleagues for a long time. So thank you very much, and also thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk a little bit about what I've done in the past.
Awesome, Livia. So look, completely conversational, but my first question might come across as almost slightly rude. Do you think, Livia, that the influence of the HR function has somewhat diminished over the years, with business managers taking over much of the decision making? Certainly, that has been my experience. I'm keen to know how you feel about it. And if you feel differently, how have you seen the HR function evolve over the years?
So I don't think at all that your question is rude. In fact, I think it is relevant more than ever before. The word influence jumps out at me because HR influence is different in every organization and stems from or lack of the expertise, competence, credibility, courage, and authenticity of the HR leader involved. So this is manifested in whether the CEO and senior leaders in the organization include the HR leader in key business issues and hence give the function the importance it rightly deserves, or use it just as an implementer of management decisions. So that's really where the issue of influence comes up. And HR influence diminishes if its inputs and recommendations are not valued or taken on board.
Right.
HR then becomes a doormat or a gatekeeper. It lacks visibility, credibility, and trust, and the role is taken on by other leaders. So I've seen that happen also in my own career. You asked me how I have personally seen the HR function evolve over time. In my own career span, it has grown from being a very basic function of just payroll and absenteeism monitoring
Yeah.
to being a role to having a role at the management table, a seat at the management table. But this can only happen if the HR leader is genuinely interested in and makes the effort to understand the business and the business language used. So I'll use an illustration to make my point.
Sure.
When I joined Maersk India many years ago, I had absolutely no clue. I joined from Standard Chartered, moved into shipping and logistics. So I had absolutely no clue about what the world of shipping and logistics was about. So I used to take the ferry from the Gateway of India across to New Bombay to
Right.
understand how the port worked, how the container freight station worked, what the operations were on the ground. So you get a feel of the business language used, you get a feel of what the functions are, what people do. And that's really very important in terms of understanding what your role is as an HR leader.
Mm.
And therefore, when it comes to, issues like, salary reviews, compensation, headcount monitoring, and all the other things that HR used to do in those days, and particularly with HR strategy, you have a great insight into what these jobs are at every level in the organization. And you cannot underestimate how important it is, even for shop floor positions, to be really sort of understood and appreciated, and most importantly, valued. And
Right.
when people see you as an HR leader visibly on the shop floor, interacting with them, engaging with them, knowing who they are, their names, etc., your whole influence as an HR leader, as a person, and your team's influence is absolutely unexplainable. So that's really where the HR influence, I think, in all my organizations has stemmed from. My getting really involved with the business, understanding the nuts and bolts of what the business does, where it's going, what its issues are, what the risks are, even within the business, to be able to really understand my own role and the role of my team.
Right. Thank you for that, Livia. In fact, as you were talking, I was reminded of a podcast I heard recently, one run by a really good friend of mine called Shuva Sarkar. It's called Money Majlis. I follow that quite closely. His recent interview was with the CEO of DBS Bank, Piyush Gupta, out of Singapore. And one of the conversations was around organizational culture. So this is really an aside to your response. Who do you see, Livia, as the gatekeeper of the organizational culture? Is it the CEO or is it the HR function? Because I'll tell you why I'm asking this. I've seen very powerful CEOs and leaders come in and destroy what I thought was an embedded organizational culture. One person doing harm. I've also seen one person do enormous good. So the power of one is phenomenal, but intuition tells us it needs to be embedded, so it has to be across the organization. No one person can change it. What do you think about this in the context of organizational culture?
Again, stemming from my own sort of experience as an HR leader, I don't think it's an either or situation. I don't think just one person, of course, can do a lot of damage, because that again is about influence, it's about power, it's about how this person treats people within an organization. And of course, I can only speak for what I have seen in my own career. When I went into an organization, the culture was what it was.
Right.
But you have a chance, with the empowerment that you're given, to work with, the CEO or the managing director and the teams, the leadership team, to either keep that culture going, to change it and to improve it, or to completely destroy it.
Mm.
And and of course, everybody has their own sort of way of operating, their own way of leading, their own way of engaging with people. And I think for an HR leader to be able to stand up and say that certain things are not right is very, very critical. HR's voice, or anybody's voice on the management team, has to be heard, has to be considered, has to be taken on board, because you're destroying a culture that has been productive, or you're improving a culture that has been productive and is going to be better, because of course
Right.
organizations are changing organisms. And a person who has sort of certain insight into how human beings work and is open to listening to peers and the colleagues on the team is, I think, very important. And of course, I would also say that the role of boards is very, very important. Corporate boards should take the responsibility to check what's going on and to see how the organization is actually operating,
Right.
and whether the culture is toxic or is really fertile and allows people to thrive.
I quite agree with you there, Livia. In fact, I wish more boards were hands-on and had a pulse for culture and what's really happening as opposed to just strategy and results. But Look, more about that later. I'm going to jump into my second question, Livia, if you're okay with that. Now, as I said in my introduction, you've had experience across diverse industries, right? We met when it was banking, then you went on to shipping, then it was consulting, then it was, I think education, and then the OPCW. Looking back, as an HR leader, did you find there were some unique facets or aspects to running HR in these industries? I'm sure things were similar, but what stood out as being different? Would you mind talking us through some of your career highlights looking back?
Well, from the very beginning, I think when I look back at my own career, the highlights of each of these organizations are obviously different because, as you rightly said, it's a vast span of completely different organizations that I've been involved with. But for me, I think the most important, ingredient in my own career has been the ability and the importance of being a continuous learner. To be in those positions, whether it was my first job as a personnel officer in Ferguson's or my last job as global HR director with the IB, it has always been, as I said, about learning what the organization does, why it does it, and who it benefits. So for me, it's all about being visible, being credible, being competent, and along with me, holding the team also together and making sure that they feel that they also have an influence and they have a very important role to play in the organizations that I worked with. Also, I think, because the diversity of the jobs that I had was so incredibly exciting and so invigorating and energizing. And of course, I was much younger then, that one wanted to do everything that one could. So, one put in long hours and really tried to sort of make sure that the HR agenda was important and was in sync with the organization's agenda. For me, making that connection between what we were doing as an HR team that was very, very closely linked to the organization's strategy was absolutely fundamental. We couldn't be working on a different planet. So whatever tasks, responsibilities, initiatives, deliverables HR was required to do had to be embedded in the organization's strategy, because otherwise it would not succeed. It would be a massive failure and it would be a wastage of time, resources, money, and everything else.
Sure. Now, at least for me, Livia, the OPCW is intriguing. It's fascinating because it's something I'm not familiar with at all. We're more familiar with traditional industries and organizations. What is running or managing an HR function like with something like the OPCW?
For me, it was a big change because, of course, it's what they call a multilateral organization. It's a quasi-UN organization. So getting in there was an absolute, for me, a privilege. Joining the UN also at a very, very senior level without having any prior experience within the UN
Right.
was an absolute joy and a great, I would say, credit to my own career in the past. And the OPCW, because it's a multilateral organization, comprises about 195 member states. So, countries from all over the world are part of the OPCW. My own HR team had, people from about 17 nationalities. And, under that one roof in The Hague, because it has just one, setup,
Head office
which is
once.
in The Hague. It was amazing to be part of that organization. And while I was there in 2013, the OPCW won the Nobel Peace Prize, and that was an absolute high point for the organization.
Amazing.
And it was a massive thumbs up for all the work that this wonderful organization has done in trying to rid the world of declared chemical weapons and continues to do so. So it's a real microcosm of the world and of the UN, and to be able to do things differently within that organization was an absolute joy and a huge honor.
So, just because we've discussed the OPCW, this question really is something I hadn't planned to ask you, Livia. So you don't need to answer it if you're not comfortable answering. But I did, more and more as you speak to young people today, they have stronger opinions and I admire that in them. Many young people today refuse to work for industries and or organizations that they believe don't support their value systems, whether it's in supporting the environment or whether it's in diversity and inclusion, things like that. Looking back at your career now, at one end of the spectrum you've been with the OPCW. Would you have worked, Livia, with, let's say, the tobacco industry or the weapons industry or something on the other side of the spectrum as an HR professional, or would you have your own reservations? How would you have looked at it?
Quite honestly, I would not work for such organizations. For me, that is very important. That's why, when I look at my own background, it was a joy to work with the OPCW and then to be offered a job within the IB, the International Baccalaureate, which does invaluable work with children's education.
True.
So it also has to resonate with my own personal values and my own, ethos, my work ethos. So when I see an organization that is not really, in line or in sync with my own values, I would give it a pass.
Right.
Clearly.
So we change track a little bit now, Livia. I know that you've had a great deal of exposure to some interesting HR tools, interventions, whether they're development or assessment centers, recruitment tools, predictive leadership success tools, behavioral testing, a lot of the science that has been brought to HR management. My question to you, Livia, is do these really work? And are they actually, in your professional experience, used correctly? And I will give you a little hint about why I'm asking this, because from my experience, I've seen, for example, development centers used as a disguise for assessment and exits, and also in some ways to promote people. But it's kind of planned, it's kind of staged. I've seen that happen, and I know that that could just be an instance, an organization. Other tools I've seen are, followed and rigorously implemented, and a lot of hope is put against what that tool is meant to do. But I've personally not seen phenomenal success with some of those tools. Perhaps some have been quite successes that I may not be aware of. What's your experience?
Well, I worked for an organization, a global organization like Maersk, which put a lot of emphasis and value on assessments,
Right.
both at the interview level, at the recruitment level, also for talent development strategies. I also got a master's degree in psychology, so
Mm.
I have to sort of really champion the whole sort of science of assessment. It has to be fit for purpose. It has to be open. It has to be transparent. It has to be clear to the people who are participating in these assessment centers or development centers about what the outcome is going to do or be for them. Now, if somebody is going to be recruited into an organization, you tell them upfront that they're going to be assessed on whatever tools the organization uses, and they're aware of it. And they also know that if they don't make it, if they're not successful, then there's obviously no chance of going forward with that organization. So you have to be absolutely open and transparent with people about what the assessment tool is going to do for them and why it is used for the organization. It has to be fit for purpose. So, like any other system that is put into place, whether it's an IT system or a finance system or an operating system, it has to be fit for purpose. And it has to be able to deliver what you're actually seeking to test and to assess. It might be used, as you've said, as a kind of a guise to sort of, demarcate people who are not performing very well from the super performers and the ones who need to be invested in. That is also important so long as people are given feedback, really authentic, important developmental feedback, so they know where they can improve or they know where they are not fit for a particular job that they might aspire to sort of apply for.
Right.
I think transparency, honesty is very fundamental in all these assessment techniques, and in that way, it's a win-win for the organization as well as for the individual.
Well, I think I agree with that answer, Livia. And I kind of knew that that's where, quite logically this might go, because I think the tools are well researched. They're good. And if at all they're ineffective, it's because of what people choose to do with them, as you're saying. All right. So look, next question, Livia, if you're okay for this. HR function, many, many facets to it. You've been in several of those roles yourself. Recruitment, compensation, reward, learning and development, talent management, culture, as we referred to, and so on. So a couple of questions for you, Livia, here. Which of these functions within the HR fold has brought you the most professional or even personal satisfaction, looking back? And what would you say is the most crucial responsibility or role of the HR function from amongst this, if that is in fact possible to answer?
For me, I think I've always got a massive buzz out of crafting the HR strategy,
Right.
along with my peers in those days, sitting together around the table, listening to them in terms of where the organization was going. Was it in a growth mode? Were they going to be divesting? Was it going to be into mergers and acquisitions? There is no way that an organization can succeed if it does not have the people agenda on its business strategy.
Mm.
So for me, I still get a massive buzz if somebody says, "Can we, put together a strategy of how we're going to do things?" So that has always given me the most amount of satisfaction and, of course, gratification as a professional to be able to understand the business, as I said before, to know where it's going, to see the direction that it's taking, and to be able to say, well, the people who are going to actually deliver your business strategy are the people that we're going to include. And
Mm.
therefore, the people agenda is very much part of the business agenda. I've always talked about this to my teams in the past. I've said, look, the business has to have an HR mindset, and HR has to have the business mindset.
Oh, brilliant.
And therefore, you have to be in sync so that whatever is happening, you must know as an HR person and as a team player within the HR team about what is happening. And sometimes, of course, it's confidential, so you cannot sort of talk about things that are very, very highly sensitive within the business, arena. But you get people on board by saying you're part of making this a success story. And I've also seen where HR is not part of the business agenda, where it has failed drastically. And it has had to really sort of backpedal and, do a massive amount of damage limitation. And we say, why? Why did you not involve us from the start? We could have informed you about this and this and this. And also, when you're talking about mergers and acquisitions, it's so important to have, the cost of HR within those discussions, because very often they underestimate the cost of of HR, of personnel, of people, of labor, not just salaries and benefits and that sort of stuff, but also the cost of not carrying people with you, which is a hidden
Correct.
cost.
Right.
And the more you are transparent about business strategy and how HR strategy fits in, and when you're seen to be part of that team, you're visible, you're credible, you're trustworthy, you're authentic, and you deliver, then that is the best, I think, thumbs up for an HR leader. So for me, strategy building is absolutely fundamental. And then that's where you see that you're an equal within the management team, and you're not sort of an after the fact or an afterthought.
Right.
So, and you can only do that when you make the effort and you understand the business and you can speak the business language.
Look, I think that's something I'll definitely take away, Livia. The business needs to have an HR mindset, and HR needs to have a business mindset. Beautifully put. Well, thank you for that. Something more personal now, Livia. I have had many things I'm proud of looking back, but I've certainly had some failures, a few, some regrets in my career as well, and a couple of them continue to haunt me. They inevitably involve people and emotions. It's not financial losses, it's not wrong strategies, really people oriented in my case. So, in particular, a poor hire in a very critical role who went on to cause damage. And secondly, my role in a rather insensitive execution of mass layoffs in one instance. Have you personally experienced failure, Livia, in your long innings? And then how have you kind of dealt with that, if at all you've had any failures?
Oh my goodness. How much time do we have? Uh, yeah, of course, I bear the scars of a lot of decisions and issues that one had to deal with as an HR leader. Absolutely, and very often, one thinks about. I mean, you go into a situation where sometimes you are told, you're instructed, get rid of so and so, and
Mm,
you know, you have to have the courage of conviction. You have to say, tell me why.
yeah.
What is the reason? Why are we doing what we're doing?
Mm,
Because at the end of the day, I want to go home with a clear conscience.
mm,
And I also want to be treated and treat other people as I would like to be treated, to give people a chance to improve, to give people a chance to turn around a corner. Because a lot of people, of course, when they come to work, don't leave them their sort of personal lives behind. They bring those personal lives to work, and very often, sometimes you don't know what's going on. And as an HR person, you have to have the compassion and the caring for people, because at the end of the day, you're dealing with somebody's life. And of
yeah.
course, I have been part of mergers and acquisitions where we've had to say to people, sorry, you can't be part of the ongoing journey. We have to say bye bye to you now. But to do it with compassion, to do it looking at them in the eye, looking at them and giving them the reason why it's not possible to take them, with us. And this has happened in many of the mergers, acquisitions that I've sort of been, part of leading and part of sort of implementing. Also, I think when it comes to exiting poor performers,
Mm,
of course, I've had to do a lot of those, but I've always given people a chance. When I've known, particularly in my own team, that somebody is not performing, to give them the opportunity, to give them the feedback, really authentic, caring feedback that, look, things are not working. What's going on? Are you not happy? Does it not fit your own aspirations? Would you rather be somewhere else? Let's have that conversation. And I think at the end of the day, people have a lot more respect for organizations and for managers and for bosses who sort of, connect with them on a very human level. Because I've always said, don't ever forget the word human in human resources.
ah,
Never ever forget that it starts with human. Resources we'll always have. We'll have money, we'll have training, we'll have beautiful offices, computers, laptops, whatever else. Those resources are always available. But where does the humanity in organizations today? You know, how do people feel if they meet you out on the street? I mean, do they say, "Oh my God, here's this henchwoman," or do they look at you and say, "I remember that conversation we had, Livia, and I'm so much better for having that conversation because I realized I was in the wrong job. I realized I was not in a good space, in a good place, and you helped me navigate through that, and I came out stronger." And for me, that is really, really important.
that's such an awesome response, Livia. And for those who are watching or listening, you will see why I describe Livia as being the kind of person she is, because of this. Don't forget the human and human resources. And look, congratulations, Livia. You've always been inspirational. But if anybody listens, this is the clip they should listen to. So thank you for that. So one final question, Livia.
Mhm.
Is there an organization or an individual HR leader that you deeply respect and admire as kind of like the flag, the hallmark of what an HR professional or organization should be?
Actually, two people spring to mind. The first one, of course, is my boss at Ferguson's many, many,
Hmm.
many years ago. A lovely man called Naz Roshan, who sadly passed away at a very young age. And at the age of 33, he was already a partner in A.F. Ferguson and Company. He had fantastic credentials. He had, sorry, studied at Stanford and Harvard. And I thought, wow, working with a boss who's come out of, Harvard was incredible. What an absolute blessing. And Nas was the sort of person who was so compassionate, who was so caring, who was so kind, and completely, as we call it now, chilled. But in those days, of course, I didn't know the word chilled. But, when I think of it, he was completely at ease in himself.
Hmm.
And I took on from him so many of his wonderful characteristics. And very often I would say, what would Nas do in this particular situation? Because he was a true human being who sort of managed the HR function with great humanity, great sense of humor, tremendous support. So Nas, of course, massively, inspirational to me. And the other person is Mr. Moller, who was, of course, the person who ran the AP Moller Group. He and his father and his grandfather had started the group. And Mr. Moller was absolutely inspirational. He passed away at the age of 93, but he was involved with the business till the last moments of his life. And looking at that man, his passion, his love, his energy for his organization, for the people, for his family was absolutely off the charts. And, I used to write to Mr. Moller actually, and I've had wonderful letters back from him just to say what a blessing it was to be part of his company and how I felt that the AP Moller group was actually my family. And that's what I always said to people when I recruited them from us. I said, you're joining the AP Moller family, not the AP Moller group. And, you better not let the family down.
Oh,
So
beautiful.
that for me is absolutely incredible.
Oh, beautiful. Look, I wish I had known these two individuals, but I can assure you, Livia, that somewhere there are people who think exactly the same of you. I know that I do. I'm acknowledging that publicly. But look, it's been lovely chatting with you. I hope you've enjoyed it. Um, we wanted this to be conversational. We wanted it to reveal the human being behind, the professional. And who better than you to start this off with? And I think all our viewers and or listeners will have got to know Livia a little bit better and be inspired by it. So thank you so much. God bless. Thank you very, very much, Livia.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, Francis. Yeah, it's been great sort of thinking about, the questions that you sent me earlier and sort of flashbacks of my past and also some of the things that I'm proud of and some of the things that I'm not so proud of. But you can't turn the clock back. All you have is your the chance that you've been able to make people's lives better and organizations better for just your being there. So that's all I'm very, very grateful for. And
Sure.
thank you for this opportunity.
No, our pleasure. Thank you again, Livia. Take care.
Take care.